Hey guys, this is Jim, and I just want to go over a few things on this bebop tune, the first 16 bars. The last, there's maybe about 9 or 10 submissions here. I'll go through just a few points that I wanted to make in each one of them. A lot of these submissions, they had some good things in them, and that's why I stole from a bunch of different ones to make the final one. But just a few points to help you out that you may not have thought of before. Some of these had the range. Remember that bebop generally was like for alto saxophone, trumpet, um, any instrument. But I mean, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie were the main, guys that really pushed the music forward. And alto saxophone range doesn't lend itself to some of the ranges that got of these submissions. So if you take a look at some of these, as you go through them on the piano, notice the range. You probably should stay within the staff. Some people went up to B flat above the staff even, and even for trumpet, that's pushing it. So the other thing that I found were, and I'll try to point out in individual ones here. This range was pretty good, staying in the staff for the most part. The other thing that I think was really important to make a good melody line in the bebop style was to outline the chord changes. So what I mean by that is some of your lines started on wrong notes of the chord. So there was a little weirdness to the line itself. And we'll get to some of those, see if I can find some of those, and I'll just go back and forth here. Here's an instance where we're getting really high in the melody here. Even for trumpet, that's up there. So the situation with the triplets, changing direction. There's another issue that I saw quite a bit of, and that is the triplets oftentimes changing direction within the triplet or immediately following the triplet. Here's an example. This isn't too bad, but generally the triplets will want to stay in the same direction to the next note. So here's an instance of, actually right here is an instance of wrong notes and changing, well, that's not a triplet, but here's an example of the wrong notes. So E fits an E minor 7 flat 5, but C doesn't. That's going to clash. This is more like an F major 7 chord or a D minor 9 chord outlining. So he's not really outlining. He may have been better off to go chromatically up to D and then outline the E minor 7 flat 5 chord there. Here's a nice one that does outline, for example, right down here. He has an accented passing tone to A, and then the 7th there going down to the 3rd. So a lot of 7th to 3rd resolutions on these 2/5 chords really help. And then he jumps to the flat 9, back to the 7th, and then resolves back up. So that's a nice little line there. We'll keep going. So those are some of the things that I really noticed was not outlining the chord. Here's a triplet figure that does not change direction. Da 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 da. So I think I stole some of this here. I stole the first part of this. This one actually was pretty good. This one, and I stole from some other people to make the final one. But this one follows some pretty good rules. Here's what I mean by the triplet not changing direction. I'll see if I can find an example of one that does. But yeah, this one had some good things in it. A lot of times, here's a typical bebop example of 7th to 3rd resolution with low chromaticism. Da 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 da, that kind of thing. Okay, so let me keep going here. I don't want to get this too long. Whoops. Okay, the other thing too that I noticed, some people started on, I think it's best to start on the 3rd or the 5th of the F major 7 chord, or maybe the root, but I had some of the people started on the 7th, the major 7th, which is a little strange, and I hope you played through these, because the better the line is, the better it outlines, the more it lays on the horn, I think the better melody it's gonna be. The other thing I noticed was anybody that had used the sharp 11 in the G9 chord. Some of you guys used it in the measure. I think it really is effective when you anticipate it and then resolve it. This kind of does that, but I think you could have done what the final one was C sharp to E to D. He did C sharp, D to B, which is the third. So not too bad, but he had the right idea there. Here's an example of a triplet not changing. Let me see if I can find one that does change direction. I think if you played these on your instrument as well, you get an idea of how they lay. And you know, bebop has a lot of disjunct lines, but some of these were almost too disjunct. And here's an example. This is getting way up there in range, but notice how he outlines the A minor there, and then hits the sharp 11 there down to the ninth. So this is pretty disjunct as far as, you know, too many intervals in a row that aren't stepwise. If you played that on the piano, it sounded a little strange. For one, you have a major seventh, this G sharp down to A, which is the ninth of a G minor 7 chord. It just sounds a little strange. So remember that you should be able to play the melody that you come up with in the bebop style, and you should hear the chord changes. You should be able to hear the chord changes in the melody. So let's see. Here's one that started on the 7th, and then just outlined the chord there. A lot of people did pretty good in this bar, and they outlined it pretty well. This had some good things I might have stolen from this one as well. Here's an example of changing direction. Oh no, that's not a triplet there. Let's see if I can find one. Okay, there's an example of changing direction. Not too bad because it just goes, you know, back from the third. But I did see a couple that were just kind of would be difficult to play. There's one that changes direction, I guess. I think you do have to consider the difficulty, although there are a lot of Charlie Parker tunes that aren't easy, but they have inherently some of the same types of things, you know, melodically, and if you study them, you get a lot out of them, that's for sure. Okay, let's see here. Here's one that started on the 7th. So if you start on the 5th or the 3rd or the root, you're going to get a little more indication of what that chord is. Okay, also going into triplets, it does help to approach them not by leap, but by step, generally half step. So he could have done maybe a C sharp there. There's one that changes direction. Could have maybe figured out how to go upwards in a nice fashion there. Here's another example of getting way too high. I know what happens is sometimes you have a line, you have to figure out what goes before it and after. You don't want to drop this down an octave, it will sound kind of weird. So you really have to, you know, construct it so that you know what you're going to, and what you're going to end up with. So, okay, here's the final one. You'll notice there are some leaps, lots of steps, but there are some leaps that come after steps. So here's an example of, actually I did change direction there, but I followed it with a nice stepwise motion, and then a leap, and then another leap. Here's one that nobody did, but I did it here. Notice how the C minor 7 chord, and Charlie Parker in his solos did this. What he would do is approach a chord tone of the next chord by doing a little chromaticism. You see the E does not fit a C minor 7 chord, but because it approaches the E flat there, you can get away with that kind of thing. That kind of thing. So if you play that on the piano, it works pretty well. And I approached, and I got to the 3rd there, followed by a leap. I had a hard time with this one right in here, but I think that worked. It sounded, the B flat 7 sounded kind of white bread. A lot of choices I tried to make, but I think that leap there and then followed by that stepwise line helps. Here's another one that that I stole from somebody. Da 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 da. That kind of thing where you approach the third by the seventh through chromaticism. So I hope that helps you out. Download below if you haven't already. You can finish this tune out and just write your own last 16 bars. I didn't give you anything but chord changes, so try to use what we've already done here. And the bridge obviously is going to be different, but when you come back to the last 8, still make it a little different. Make it more like an A, B, A1 or something. A different, not exactly the same as here. So good luck, and I hope we can finish this out and have a nice bebop tune.